Welcome to the Salt Strong Fishing Podcast. Salt Strong has been helping saltwater anglers catch more fish in less time for 10 years and is now the largest and most trusted saltwater fishing community in America. If you want to catch more saltwater fish, then keep listening. If you want to speed up your fish catching results even faster, then join the private insider community at saltstrong.com. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Are angels real? Hey everybody, Joe Simons, like diamonds, back again, Salt Strong Unchurched. First and foremost, I want to thank my buddy Ryan, who sent me over a podcast with Tucker Carlson talking about angels and demons. It was fascinating. It was with an atheist, or a guy who was an atheist the majority of his life and has now switched over to Christianity when he realized how wrong he was. Fascinating interview, by the way. And also want to thank my friend Don, who sent me over another similar sort of video talking about our soul and what happens and kind of a similar aspect of the spirit world. And let's just get right into it. So this is kind of a combination of things I learned on both of these. But the question is, are angels real? And I didn't know this, but the word angel is mentioned, it's over 200 times, depending on which version of the Bible you look at, but it's as high as 300 and as low as like 210. So it's almost assumed that there are angels, right? The Bible usually doesn't throw a word like that hundreds of times unless we assume that is true. And furthermore, is Tucker Carlson's guest, who is an atheist, confirmed, that every single civilization from thousands and thousands of years ago, not just Christianity, I'm talking the Mayans, the Jewish, everyone has believed that there's angels and even spirits and demons. So he's like, at some point as an atheist, he was very science-based, right? A lot of atheists are. And a lot of people who struggle with God and with faith are very science-based, meaning they want proof, right? They want evidence that it's true. And he realized at one point later in his life when he kind of had one of these awakenings, and he's like, this whole time I was forcing everyone to prove it to me it was true. But he's like, when I looked at it from the 30,000 foot view, and I was like, atheists are only like a very small percentage of the world, like less than 5, right? So he's like 95% of people in the world and have for civilizations in the Bible and the Quran, all of these mention angels and spirits and a God. And he's like, I've been telling everyone they got to prove to me, but he's like, at some point, if 95% of the whole world and for eternity of the whole world believes one thing to be 100% true, and I'm the 5% that doesn't, at some point, the onus is on me to prove that they're wrong, right? He's like, that's the funny part about atheists. And anyone who's just that science-based and can't believe, like, oh, well, you got to prove it to me. And I love how he flipped it. He's like, in my whole life, I believe that, because I would get in arguments with Christians and anyone who is religious about this is stupid. You can't prove any of it. He's like, at some point it hit me. I was like, man, the onus is on me. He's like, everyone else in the whole world, like 95% of people believe there are spirits and there are angels and there is, a world outside of just us and flesh, that it doesn't just end and it's not just here by chance. And we want all this proof, but at some point we got to prove that they're wrong. No, it was a fascinating interview. And one of the stories that, man, really hit me hard from this guy, and these are all, documented stories, not stories he's just making up, but it was a pastor and his wife were in a town, and, they had essentially a mission trip where they were going to go try to save as many people as they can. And the people in this town were not fans of them. Because they didn't like them there. They didn't want to become Christians at the time. And so there was essentially a raid on their house. And so imagine this is many, many years ago. And they're there with their clubs and bats and machetes and probably a few old school guns. And they're coming up to the house, and the whole town was kind of in on this. And it's just the pastor and his wife, no one else. just the two of them in this house, and they see them kind of coming, up the hill to slaughter him. That was the plan, is they were just going to slaughter and burn the whole house down, be done with this crazy pastor and his wife who were bugging all the citizens of the town. And so they just got down on their knees and prayed, like, God, somehow protect us. They didn't have weapons. They weren't even going to try to fight these guys. They just sat there and prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed, and nothing happened. They could hear the people outside. They could hear, there was discussions, and they could hear, some threats. And all of a sudden, night goes on, and slowly but surely, this crowd of the angry mob with their guns and, pickets and axes and all this stuff slowly start walking away and leaving. And, the pastor and his wife just assumed it was from the prayer, and found out later as they actually got to talk to, like, the ringleader of this, who ended up becoming a Christian. This is all a true story. So the ringleader, the guy who was trying to convince everyone else to come up and kill him, they finally got to meet him face to face. And he's like, hey man, like, do you mind telling me, this is the pastor, he's like, do you mind telling me, like, what happened that night? He's like, I still don't understand it all. I thought we were going to die. And why did you guys spare us? And he's like, spare you? He's like, you serious? He's like, your whole house was surrounded by these huge, muscular white men, like men in, like, all dressed in white with weapons. Like, we were scared to death of them. We weren't, we sat there and were yelling at them, but we didn't want to pick a fight with them. They thought they would destroy us. And so, and this was confirmed amongst multiple people. I mean, all that were interviewed in this mob all saw these same white, like, big muscular men, all dressed in all white. Imagine this, with their own weapons. And that was why they left. It was surrounding the entire house. It looked like he had his own army. And obviously the pastor, it's like, there was literally no one else there besides my wife and I. So the whole thing is mind boggling. Another story they shared was a lady over in I believe it was India. It was a Muslim country. And she had this, poor lady, not anyone who was of much, like, importance or anything, but still made some headlines and some news with it as she told her tale. And she had this very, very vivid dream one evening, and Jesus was there. And so she was not Christian, and Jesus was walking along this area with her in this very vivid dream, basically saying, "Come to me, that you're loved, and I want you to come with me." And how she described it, she goes, "I've never felt that much love and peace in my entire life, and I wanted more. I didn't want this dream to end." And she started having some questions, and Jesus stopped her, and he goes, "You know what? Tomorrow you can ask my friend all those questions." And she's like, "What friend?" And the whole time she'd been so enamored in her dream, this vision with Jesus, she didn't notice there was a person right next to Jesus this whole time. And so she looked at him, smiled, and then boom, woke up. So that was a Thursday night. Friday, the next day, she goes down to the market, busy market. Imagine stuff you've seen in movies, or if you've been to places like India, where you're in a big, massive market. There's chaos, and everyone's going crazy. She couldn't shake this dream. And as she's walking through, she sees the man from the dream, the guy that Jesus said, "Ask my friend tomorrow." So it is tomorrow. It's the next day. This guy is there. She goes up to him and she says, "Hey, you're the guy from my dream." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "I had a dream that I was with Jesus, and he told me that I was supposed to talk to you tomorrow, which is today." And he's just like, "This is amazing." And so he was actually a pastor that was on a mission trip, and he actually he did not want to go that day to this market. He was like, "No, I'm not going to be able to make any impact. It's going to be another wasted day." So he had no idea he was supposed to meet her, but he had this spirit calling. He's like, "All right, I'm going to meet someone. Today's going to be good. Something's going to happen today," which is why he got enough energy to pick himself up and go to that market. And she ended up becoming a Christian, and brought a whole lot more people to Christianity because of this guy, all because of this dream. She said it was the exact guy. I mean, literally dressed the same way. Like, how do you explain that stuff if angels aren't real? And I have a personal story I've shared if you've been listening to my podcast before. The time I had skin cancer, the melanoma, this was almost a stage 2 cancer. So it wasn't just something that you just kind of cut out. It was a full day of surgery. And I was in Atlanta at the time and at a big hospital system there. And the guy who, I don't even know what the role was at this point. I have to go back and look, but it was essentially when they're putting all the iodine and stuff through you so they can do special x-rays to see where, all the cancer is spread. And this is all, pre-surgery so that they know exactly how far they are cutting, what lymph nodes they have to get, if anything else has been infected. They're just kind of looking in your body without that, I guess, iodine. And if you're in the medical field, I'm sure I'm butchering the whole thing. But it was a real doctor, and it wasn't like a nurse. So it was a real MD. We had a long discussion with him. He was the one, as he's walking out of the door, he stops and looks at my dad and I. He's like, "Hey, God just told me I need to pray over you." And says this crazy prayer, touches my arm right where the cancer was. And I really felt like at that point I was healed. It was, my dad and I were both crying. It was one of the most emotional times of my entire life, and still is to this day. The whole thing was just surreal. And I really did. At that point, I knew I was healed. I was like, I don't have any fear. I had so much anxiety before that. And when that guy prayed over me, it was like it all just kind of melted away. And the wild part is, the whole thing was all a blur. But a week or two later, you start getting the bills. If you ever had a big surgery or have someone who's had a big surgery with a hospital, and you have multiple doctors that you're seeing, from, anesthesiologist to the surgeon, blah, 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 you keep getting all these bills. And the whole time I told myself, I'm going to look this guy up and just thank him and, tell him I really appreciate it. And I'm looking through all the bills. I don't see his name listed anywhere. And I go to the hospital website of like that department. I don't see this guy. Like, I don't recognize the face. I don't recognize any names that would have been similar. It was almost like he wasn't there. And I know that sounds bizarre. And my dad's the same way. Was like, man, we literally looked, and it's not like I did a full-on investigation and hired a private investigator, but I thought that was just bizarre. And I've shared with people who even work in that hospital system, the store, they're like, man, there's no way someone did that. They would have been fired. Like, you don't just go randomly pray and touch someone like that. So I don't know. I can't say it's an angel or not, but I can just tell you that was something that was not normal, which you could say maybe is an angel. There was something going on there that is tough to, really impossible to explain, that science can't possibly explain. And another one, this is a crazy one that happened in our own company. So in the early years, Luke and I at Salt Strong were, like a lot of small businesses in your first 2 years, just struggling to get by. There are days that go great, and there are days and weeks and months that don't go great. And if anyone's who's run a company, as you start trying to grow it and hiring people, there are even times where it's tough to meet payroll. And we had a couple of those times early on that were tough. And we had this guy, Nick. Nick's still with us today. And Nick had taken a little bit of a pay cut because he believed in the vision, the mission of the company. He loved fishing. He loved what we stood for. And he was having fun. But, we actually did pay him every time, but we had that conversation like, Nick, we obviously paying you, but man, it's just tight right now. Like, Luke and I weren't paying ourselves at the time. It wasn't fun. What we were doing was fun, but not getting paid and still got bills to pay. That part wasn't fun. And so we told Nick, like, hey, there's a chance that we're probably gonna have to cut, your salary a little bit just so we can keep this thing going. And he understood. I mean, we flat out showed him the numbers in the books, and he's like, I get it. And he obviously went home and had a conversation with his wife. She's like, you know what, I love what you guys are doing, but we got family, we got kids. Like, we have to have a steady job. And so he started looking at other jobs and interviewing, and had every intention of leaving Salt Strong. And so this is early on. This is like year 2, maybe 2.5. So early on, we weren't even that big of a brand at the time. And Nick still, like, he felt something just tugging at him as he was about to essentially quit Salt Strong. And he's like, all right, Lord, just show me a sign. Like, I'm very conflicted on this. I know I need to support my family. Same point, I feel like you put me here for a reason. Show me a sign. So he's got these guys outside of his house who were working on a big oak tree that was about to fall over. And they were there to cut and trim and take away the oak trees, like a 2-day thing. And the day after that Nick had said that prayer to God, like, God, just show me a sign, he's out there and he sees this guy. He's literally working from his we all work from home, and he's working in his home office, and he's looking outside at some of these workers, and this guy's got this bright orange shirt on, like a long sleeve, like sun shirt. And he keeps looking at it, and the guy turns around, it says Salt Strong. And it's like, what in the world? Like, what are the chances? Because at the time, like, we had barely even sold any of those shirts. And certainly we weren't like a huge brand that everyone's wearing Salt Strong. So Nick finishes up his little project. He goes out to the guy and he's like, hey man, I like that shirt. And he's like, oh yeah, thanks. And he's like, I actually, work for them. And he's like, oh man, that's so cool. What a great brand. Something like, I wish I could work for them. And Nick's like, what's your name? The guy goes, Angel. Boom. Isn't that crazy? So all of a sudden, Nick starts getting emotional. He's like, what? Your name's Angel? And literally, Nick had said, like, show me a sign, show me an angel. He literally had, like, asked that of God, like, show me a sign, show me some angel, something. And so after that point, Nick's like, you know what? That was the sign. Here's the crazy part. Just like I looked up the guy the doctor, we looked through our entire very small database, and we'd only sold a handful of those. It was that bright orange shirt. If you ever saw one, we barely sold any of them. There was no one in our database named Angel who bought one of those. Now, certainly someone could have given it to him, but the whole thing was just bizarro. Nick never saw the guy again. We never were able to find out who he was. Just absolutely crazy. So, long story short, do I believe that they're angels? Absolutely. And, I've shared, some of my thoughts even on things that we see in our own environment, like eagles or hawks or deer. I know it's different for everyone, even butterflies. I just feel like there's sometimes even power in those. I've had times where things like a deer or a hawk or an eagle have passed, and I even get like just goosebumps, and it's like you feel like there's a presence around you, whether it's old descendants or an actual real angel or a guardian angel, whatever it is. So I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm like the ex-atheist, where at some point, we've all had some experience, and when people are interviewed, the majority of people have either had personally or know someone who has had some sort of experience like that just didn't make sense, that it was impossible to explain. And the only way to explain it, whether your life was saved at last minute or, you had this crazy vision that it was something bigger than just ourselves and our human flesh. So I love your thoughts on this. If you've ever had any experiences, I love stories. Hit me up, joe@saltstrong.com. Other than that, keep praying, keep loving each other, keep being awesome, and got a lot more great episodes coming up soon. Love you guys. Talk to you in the next episode.
Want more fishing tips, shortcuts, and tools so you can catch more fish per trip? Then head over to saltstrong.com now and join the movement. Tight lines, and thanks for listening.